you've spoken, I think, or you've met with Trump. I don't know if you have on this topic specifically, but has he gotten religion? Will he erect a presidential personnel process? Because before you can really put a dent in those 3 million bureaucrats, you have to start with your own, the inner circle, and then thousands of political appointees. He's also talked about, I think, Schedule F. It's a great letter to choose for a way of taking some of these bureaucrats and saying, you're really in a policy-making job, and so maybe you should get into a different status. Do you think he can pull it off? Do you think they're ready?
So can I explain one thing really quick, and then I will address that question, Christian? People have asked, why does government continue to grow? It just continues to expand, and it grows and it grows and it grows. Well, it's built into the DNA of the administrative state, because progressives believe that the state is salvation. And if the state is salvation, why would you ever want to limit salvation? You don't. Salvation should be in all aspects of our lives until every aspect of our life is saved, and we reach the end of history and the perfectly rational state, and mankind reaches a higher plane of existence and is perfected. So when government continues to grow and grow, that was the point from day one. It's built into the DNA. That's why you actually have to slay Leviathan, kill the beast, because if you don't, government's going to continue to be perpetual. 36 trillion in debt that's how you get there, because the state, which is salvation, must be funded, and there is no end to it. It is perpetual. Now, back to Donald Trump. He did not get presidential personnel right in his first term for the first 3 years. Johnny DiStefano was a disaster. The fourth year with Johnny McEntee, Johnny knew exactly what was going on, knew that he had to have people appointed to the right positions who were on the same page with Trump, realized the dangers of the administrative state. So I would say, and I write this in the book, Trump has to get transition personnel right. He has to get PPO right day one with somebody that's on the same page, who's going to be making those plum book appointments correctly. And you and I both know this, Christian. I haven't been in D.C. for a while. There's thousands, really about 400 or 500 are key ones that are going to be important decision makers, have to be on the same page with Trump, have to be sent into the various departments and agencies, understanding it will be war every day. They will resist, they will fight, and have to be on the same page with Trump that the administrative state is not legitimate, and on the same page with him devolving and breaking apart the administrative state. So I lay out in the last chapter, you mentioned Schedule F. I talk about reduction in force exercises. I talk about dealing with OPM. I talk about NSC. NSC is not under presidential personnel, which is how you get Chowthy Vindman into NSC, and then basically performing a soft coup, trying to perform a soft coup against the duly elected president of the United States. So there's a lot of reform items. The thing that he's got to get right, obviously, is PPO with a commitment as the head of the executive branch where the administrative state resides. I am going to go to war with the administrative state and break the state. And I say that because he keeps on talking. I've told him this. You talk about draining the swamp. Well, the foundation of the swamp is the state. You have to break the state before you can drain the swamp. If you break the state, you will drain the swamp, and then you can restore the republic. And I also told him this. You've got to get the presidential personnel right and understand that everything they're going to throw against you, which this was 2 years ago. We were sitting in Bedminster having this conversation. The lawfare was already begun. Holy cow, it went on steroids after that. But it's all about who decides, sir. They're going to throw stuff against you that is going to be insane, but it's really because they know you are an existential threat to the administrative state status quo because you reject the premise, because you think you decide, they think they decide. That's what this is all about.
All right. Well, and also try and shoot you on the ninth hole. Mark, as you sort of open the aperture a little bit, separate from the issue of whether Trump has figured it out, are there enough Republicans? Do you think the movement?
I think there's two things. Enough? I mean, one of the things that Ned has been hitting on, and I've actually heard you talk about this before, Ned, is I think when I look at what has to happen, I won't tell the story now, but I had an experience courtesy of Steve Bannon and some other guys with presidential personnel where I sat around in a cafeteria for 2 days, never called into a room, with like 4 or 5 other guys, all $500,000 a year plus guys who said, "I'll serve this president." And then we never got called in, and nothing ever happened. And there were people trying to, I thought I was going to get a job. I remember my wife was that we were so happy I didn't, couldn't afford it. Time with the kids. But the thing is like, I only have 2 prescriptions here. In fact, I was so disturbed by it. I actually wrote Jack Keane because I knew General Keane. I was so just because I was a businessman. We were sitting there going like, this is not how you do stuff. You know, you don't have 25-year-olds in here coming talking to. Not that our egos are big, just, you know, you don't have them coming by and blowing people off. Not us, just other people we were watching. But my point is this. I think Trump has to get a couple of things straight. First of all, I think he needs to get what we would call he needs some guys who are willing to die on the stake. In other words, you got to have people who are going to go in there and say, you know what, I'm going to come in here in 2 years, I'm going to be driven out of here, and I know it. In other words, there'll be 3 or 4 congressional hearings because I'm doing something. He's got to get those guys, and I think they exist. I'm very sure they exist. The problem is you get people, like I said, the Romney guys who are coming in, and they're careerists. They came in, oh, my God, I want to stay here forever. I want to bounce over to this place, and they never leave.
Yes.
And the second thing I think that is kind of independent of that is there's an old saying that, you know, if they're not there, they're not a problem. One of the things is that I think he is going to fire people, and I think he has to do it. He's got 4 years. I think he'll probably have a Supreme Court that would back him up. I think they need to be absolutely brutal. You know, I hate to use the word Elon Musk, but nothing happens if you let a lot of people go. In other words, just do it and then see what happens, and that'll be it.
No, I even write about some of this in which I would encourage the head of the executive branch, the president, to visit the various departments and agencies to deal with the bureaucrats that you know will be stalling. It's one of their favorite tactics. Oh, I'll deal with that later. Oh, I missed that email. Oh, I'll get back to that in a few weeks or a few months. Calls in those bureaucrats in front of the head of the department, the agency, whatever it is, on the carpet and said, why are you delaying? And you will do this immediately. You'll do it right now. And if they refuse, fire them on the spot. And if there is then pushback, let's go all the way to the Supreme Court and have that conversation, because you're right. The Supreme Court has decided, you can see it this summer, they've decided with the Chevron deference and the SEC tribunals, we kind of had enough of this administrative state approach. We believe it is unconstitutional. Multiple decisions this summer demonstrating that. I think I'd love to have that fight with this Supreme Court with a powerful executive saying, I'm going to fire you. Let's go. Yeah. Let's have this conversation.
I think the other thing, too, is, and this is the businessman in me, when you fire somebody, I worked for a guy who took over back in the 70s. He took over the Guam. Yep. They had the Guam Port Authority. And that was the days we were transitioning from ships with the King Kong nets to the modern containers. So you needed less people. You just needed less people. And what he said was, look, just pay them out. I'm not saying we pay out all these people, but
that's one of the reform items.
Yeah,
you can do voluntary separations. Yes.
Yeah, just pay them out. Quite frankly, what will happen is usually the best and the brightest will actually take it and go try to do something else, which is fine with me because, look, I have the very Hong Kong attitude. I don't mind having stupid people in government. I just don't want too many of them. You know what I'm saying? In other words, stupid and lazy in government is not the worst thing in the world to have. But I do think of that, but I will say I really worry with the Harris administration. I just see the people that come in with these left-wing administrations, and I see it, frankly, more closely in my world, not so much on the federal level, but on the state level. And you see who they come in, and they are not the brightest, they are not the best, but they have immense power. And all of a sudden,
very dictatorial.
You're sitting across from somebody who you wouldn't give a job as your office administrator, and they're telling you, oh, we need you to do this in your construction project. We need you to do that, basically because they can tell you, and then you end up in fighting and all that stuff. So I think Ned's spot on. I think if Trump could do that, if he can do what we're talking about, I think everything else works just fine, to be perfectly honest with you.
It's amazing in my mind what a powerful executive who rejects the premise can do in 4 years, even if Congress proves itself, as per usual, to be feckless, gutless, spineless wonders. Mm-hmm. The executive orders that he can do and the various steps he can take over the course of 4 years with a Supreme Court that's on the same page with him, with the American people backing him up, because, again, they've been hopefully illuminated and had clarity and have kind of gotten to the point where we reject the premise as well, you could make immense strides. And I have to tell you this, though, there's a couple things. He has 4 years. What do you think he did by having a 39-year-old vice presidential nominee? He went all in on this.
Yeah,
right? This is not about there are a lot of people, the establishment Republicans, everybody, we're just going to have to outlast him for another 4 years. We'll be fine. And he was like, oh, really? Chip's all in. I'm all in. I have a 39-year-old VP who hopefully will be set up to have another 8 years. Because I keep on saying to people, 4 years is a great start. You need to have power for 12 years in a White House committed to this, with hopefully Congress at some point waking up and going, you know what, maybe we should stop sub-delegating our legislative authority to the Article 2 unelected bureaucrats. And all at the same time, how about we just starve the beast? How about we just say, you know what, power the purse in the House. We're not going to do that until we actually get some real accountability. And the last thing I'll say on this that I think needs to be made, some people are going to push back and go, we're in a very complex age, Ned. We're in the 21st century. There's a lot of things that we're dealing with. We need these technical experts. Okay, fine, fair enough. No, fair enough. They're in the Article 2 branch. They're unelected. Shift them back into the Article 1 branch as being part of the permanent congressional staff where they would be accountable to the duly elected representatives of the people. Shrink that considerably. We don't need this massive amount of these, technical educated elite, which I would call some of them are credentialed idiots. But you put them under the Article 1 branch into the permanent committee staff, and then you have some sort of accountability to the duly elected representatives who are supposed to be doing the legislating in the Article 1 branch, not this Article 2 unconstitutional, unelected bureaucrats doing the legislating. Enough of that. Nothing to do with the Constitution. Quite frankly, nothing to do with our American tradition of government.
When you talk about the expertise, I have a
credentialed idiocracy.
I know. Last week I was in D.C. Kristen saw me in D.C. and I talked to a friend. I didn't get a chance to see him, but he was in town from San Francisco, and he was part of a group that was talking to people about AI. And he goes, what are you doing? I go, I'm up on Capitol Hill talking to people about AI and potential legislation. I go, what it's like? He goes, it's like lecturing monkeys. In other words, I do tech investments sometimes. I sit in the room and I just make sure somebody 30 years younger and smart sitting next to me to tell us what to do. When they say they need these experts and everything like that, every time you look at them, you just see it. And it's one of the reasons I'm convinced they hate Musk so much, not just because of all the other stuff, but literally here's a guy with that budget compared to what he's done. And you look at NASA, and it's not just NASA, it's the Air Force, it's the National Reconnaissance Office. And there's
no accountability. We just keep funding this stuff.
And Musk has got he's got ships flipping in the air. I'm so stupid. I was watching that and I go, oh my God, it's going to crash. And that was actually that planned maneuver where they flip the thing as it's going down. I'm going like, that's where I'm going, thank God I'm getting ready to retire because I don't want to compete with those people.
Well, but part of the problem is when you don't have any accountability because they've insulated themselves and it makes it very hard for them to be fired. Again, I put out some of this stuff and how we can reform that. You get this credentialed idiocracy. If you had a process by which you could fire some of these folks in mass, you could actually demand better quality of technical experts and actually bring in the best and the brightest to be part of the Article 1 legislative branch and part of the permanent committee, congressional committees. But right now, some of the things they've done, they've not only set it up to be separated out from political accountability, they've insulated themselves even more to make it even harder to fire them. And that, again, leads to just total mediocrity.